Yes, people. Now, this is the story of not really how I bought my first house, but how I nearly lost it. And it wasn't even because of the money, it was rather just because of, I want to say my credit profile, but not even that. I've come to find that there's way more factors basically that go into being accepted for buying a house than what meets the eye. So this is how I had to basically just put the property in my dad's name, part of it anyway, so I could save the deal. So if you're either like young, self-employed, or you just don't tick all of the traditional boxes that lenders look for in people that they're lending to for houses, then this might be a workaround that either saves your deal if you're in the midst of one, or if you're looking to get on the property ladder like I was back then. This is how you can go about it, and this is how I went about it. And by you having this prior information, you can almost frame the deal in a way where you don't have to suffer the same, or rather incur the same cost that I did, because I found these things out the hard way, and it cost me thousands basically. So this can save you a bunch of money if you listen, right? So to set the context, I think this was in 2022, something like that. I was 21 at the time still. In fact, I just turned 22 even at this point, I think, because it rolled into 2023 by the time I came to refinance the house. Now, originally, the intention was to just flip it. So I wasn't really concerned with the exit being, me getting a mortgage, etc., etc. So I just said, I'm buying this, I'm gonna flip it, so on and so forth, right? But through no fault of my own, that exit went to shit pretty much. And this is why they always say have multiple exit strategies, because plan A might not work, you need to double down on plan B, right? In an ideal world, you can just double down on plan A and make it work, but sometimes things don't happen that way. So this happened to be one of those times. Now, when the sale fell through, I had a few months left on the bridging loan that I was on, and I didn't want to risk another sale going through. So I said, you know what, let me just retain the asset, right? It's my first one. I guess the sentimental value there as well. So this could almost kickstart the my portfolio owning, or however you want to look at it. So I spoke to a broker at the time, and I remember we tried to look at the available options. Now, when he had asked me for what in essence is like your background information, so how old you are, employment status, credit history profile, whatever, if you already own other houses, blah 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 blah. Basically, they just need to know everything about you, right? And the first time you do, you'll be thinking like, what the hell, this seems like overbearing, but it makes sense in the grand scheme of things, but it is a bit annoying. So went through all of that stuff. Now these times I was thinking, you know what, like my credit score is it's not even relatively good, it's good, it's perfect almost. No type of missed payments, a few lines of credit open that I'd always paid back on time, etc. Like everything was green, right? So I was thinking, yeah, like I shouldn't have any problems. But what was unknown to me at the time was that lenders don't just look at your credit profile / credit score, whatever you want to call it. They take into account the entire picture. So you could have absolutely perfect credit, but if the rest of your profile, so your employment status or your age, your landlord status or whatever, doesn't align with the type of people they want to lend to, then you're just not going to get access to their products. And that was literally what happened with me. So I learned it the hard way, right? I tried to get a mortgage. No lenders were willing to take me on. I remember there was one, but I can't even say it fell through because it didn't even get to progress to an actual application stage. It was based on a rough quote, and then when they got all the details, they were just like, yeah, no. And I was like, what the hell? But remember, again, at the time, 21, 22, first time landlord, no like full-time stable employment. So it was like lenders viewed me as high risk, even though all of the data, like credit-wise, the most applicable data suggested that I was sensible and I could borrow money and pay it back on time, never missed a payment, all of this stuff. So the credit score isn't everything, right? It's almost like doing everything right but still getting the wrong outcome. That's basically what this was. So I was just caught in between a rock and a hard place. I was thinking like, what the hell am I even gonna do, right? And then it was my mum that came up with the idea of basically selling part ownership to my dad, because all the areas that I fell short on, he basically covered. So been in employment for however long, already owned an asset, is way older than me, you know. So it was almost like a match made in heaven, right? But the only issue with this was bringing him onto what's essentially known as like the title deed would almost be considered like a transfer of ownership. So I bought the house, obviously, a few months back, like just me, myself, right? And this rolls into the mistake that I'm about to explain. Because I bought it in my personal name, I didn't want to, I was forced to, pretty much, because the auction time frame, we couldn't set up the company bank accounts in time. There was just complications. So I had to switch it to my personal name. If I'd bought it in my company, let's say limited company Reese Co., I'm director and sole shareholder of that company. Now, when I come to refinance, if for whatever reason, like what happened, they said that they can't give me a mortgage, if I now added a shareholder, hence, or in other words, my dad, to this company, the ownership is still the same, it's still the company, but now there's two different people, right, underneath the company as a part of the company, who the mortgage lenders can basically like reference for their applications, which would have strengthened the application without me needing to pay stamp duty again. So ended up having to fork out like an extra couple thousand. I think it was 2,000, 3,000, around there. The house wasn't incredibly expensive, and stamp duty these times weren't where they are at now, you know. So it wasn't it wasn't crazily significant, but still was an extra couple grand. Like I would want that money back, you know. So what I did was we applied for a joint mortgage now, right, with him on the application as well. So his employment records, credit profile, which is perfect, all of that stuff. And lo and behold, we had lenders suddenly, you know, looking at the case saying that, yeah, cool, they can take it on. Now, the lesson for me there was sometimes we have to think outside the box in an unorthodox way in order to keep things alive for the time being. Like we might have to make a short-term sacrifice, which at that time was like, cool, let me pay the stamp duty again, you know, transfer the ownership part of it, do what I can basically to get the initial refinance across the board so I can redeem this bridging loan, right? And then I can make better moves moving forward to almost make the best of, I'm going to say, a bad situation, even though the situation wasn't bad. I was, you know, I was owning the house at the end of the day. And it made it easier to do subsequent projects. So it wasn't ideal. It wasn't how I wanted the project to go, but it still worked out in the end. And maybe it's even better it worked out that way as well. So I lost money on the stamp duty, but the important thing is I kept the deal alive. And a lot of the time in this game especially, it requires a lot of adaptability, because things are always going to crop up. But as long as you can pivot, maneuver, and continue to adjust and continue playing, then you're always going to win in the long run. And that was the mentality that I entered the game with anyway, which is why it's if something doesn't go to plan today, it doesn't matter, because the things I can do now will create a better tomorrow. And that's the mentality that you have to carry forward. So if you're basically like what I was, young, you've got the funds needed for a project, whether you're raising it from investors, whether it's like business or whatever it is that you're doing, you've got the money that you need for the project. You've got the know-how, but you may not have I call it the intricacies, right? So like the necessary credit profile, the necessary background details, information, whatever it is. There are ways around it by leveraging people who have the things that you need in order to make it happen. So case in point, one of my developer friends, he was doing like a crazy project. I'm talking millions pounds worth. Now, when you're looking at borrowing for those types of projects, they really hone in on your, let's call it your track history. What projects have you successfully delivered already? If you haven't got anything, then you're not going to get the lending that you need. Or if you can get it by way of someone else who has the experience, then happy days, you can, And what he did, he entered like a strategic partnership. Someone basically just had to bring the credibility, and that's it. And they got an equity stake in the deal, right? Almost like the same thing with my dad. He just had to bring the quote unquote credibility to get my thing over the line, right? And sometimes we have to make moves like that for the greater good. So always stay adaptable. Know that sometimes you need to take the short-term loss or do something that you may not ideally want to do for the long-term gain. But that joint ownership stuff is a real hack, and it's especially effective when used in like a limited company type structure. Obviously, this isn't any type of tax accounting advice, right? You'd have to actually seek professional advice, but these are the ways that you can go around it. These are the ways I've gone around it myself. If you do fall short in either one of those departments. So like I said, young, first-time landlords, you haven't got perfect credit, and yeah, I was going to say you've got no prior experience, but that's the same as saying like first-time landlord. So yeah, that's that. If I could go back and do it all over again, the only thing that I would have changed is having bought it in a limited company, which I wanted to do. But other than that, all the other mistakes and things that I learned along the way, the money I lost, I just call it me paying to learn. It's like these days I just pay through like mentors and stuff like that. But then I paid through the actual loss, losing the money, doing it myself. So it was the best type of education, in my opinion. Experience is always going to be the best teacher. If you can get that guidance before you make the mistake yourself, then happy days. But if you can't, then you can do it like me, to be honest, and just dive straight in there, take the action, get the feedback. But that's the end of this video. It's quite I think it's quite short, probably about 40 minutes or so. Any questions, any thoughts, anything, just leave it in the comment section below, and yeah, we'll talk about something else next time.